All right, ladies. You know that we're coming up to that storm, that end all storms here for Paul, and I don't envy him for having gone through this. I really don't. I can't imagine. I can't. It makes me seasick just reading it. I have been seasick. I've been on a cruise, a very small vessel around the Mediterranean in Israel, and we hit some rough waters. And I remember looking down the hallway of the ship and just watching the hallway go like this. And I made the mistake of thinking, okay, I'll eat some soup to settle my stomach. Yeah, that was not smart. I dismissed myself quickly from the meal, staggered down, because it was the only way you literally staggered as you walked. And down to my room, barfed the soup up, and I think I took Bonine. It's like a Dramamine type thing. It's knocked myself out. I had forgotten that I had the acupressure wristbands with me. They worked better than any medicine. And that's what got me through the rest of the time. But I can't imagine what Paul went through. So if you would turn to Acts chapter 27, you know, when we left off in the end of 26, he's given his testimony before Felix and then before King Agrippa and Bernice. And in Felix's, when he was before Felix, he had to appeal to Rome, appeal to Caesar. And so it's been decided that his appeal would, you know, his case would be tried in Rome, and he would have to make a journey there, okay? So in 27, we see this begin to happen. When it was decided he should sail for Italy, they handed Paul over, they commissioned him over to, and some other prisoners. So it wasn't just Paul, but it was a number of prisoners who were set to go to Rome for trial. And the centurion, he was commander of the Augustan cohort. His name is Julius. Not Orange Julius, not Julius, but Julius. He's a guy who learns along the way how important it is to listen to Paul. So I'm not going to try to pronounce some of these words, but they set sail, and it's not a simple trip, okay? It is in the fall, okay? And you're going to see at some point that they say the fasting time is over. That's a reference to Yom Kippur. So we're talking that this is happening all in September, October, November-ish, around there. This is a series. It does not a quick trip, okay? So they get as far as Sidon, and this guy is very nice to him. He's probably told to treat him with consideration, and he does. In verse 3, he treats him with consideration, allows him to go to his friends and receive care. All right, not too many prisoners that would get that luxury, but they knew that Paul was a man of integrity. He's already proven it, as long as he's been held in custody in Caesarea. So from Sidon they put out, and they sailed under the shelter of Cyprus because the winds were contrary. This is the first sign. This is not the sailing season, okay? I'm not into sailing. I don't know a lot about it, but I do know this. I never book a cruise in the fall. There's a reason why cruises are cheaper in the fall.
Hurricanes.
It's a hurricane season, okay? So they sailed along the sea. They get to Lycia, along the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, and they land in Myra in Lycia. And the centurion has to change ships. Talk about, you know, I don't know about you, but even when I fly, I want a direct flight. If I can get a direct flight, I'll pay a little bit more for that, okay? Because it's a pain in the tuchus to change flights and to make sure your luggage changes and all that. That's nothing compared to this, okay? I'm feeling like a weenie here, even for just complaining about it. So he finds a Greek ship, an Alexandrian ship, Alexandria, Greece, or Egypt, actually, Alexandria, Egypt. Could be. Who knows? Doesn't matter. And they set sail for, it was heading for Italy, okay? So he books passage on that. They sailed slowly for a good many days and with difficulty. Okay, so the winds are contrary. This is not an easy trip. It takes many days. They get down to a place I can't even begin to pronounce. Who puts a C before an N? I don't know. Since the wind did not permit them to go further, they sailed under the shelter of Crete off of Salmone, or whatever. And with difficulty, they sailed past it. You see how many times he says with difficulty, with difficulty, this is not a good trip. I don't know if Satan was trying to kill him or not. I think he might have been. They get to a place called Fair Havens, which was the city of Lycia. And when a considerable time had passed, so they're kind of stuck there, the voyage was now dangerous, since even the fast, see what I was pointing to, the fast, that's a reference to the week of the Day of Atonement and the Feast of Tabernacles, I think. Yeah, Peggy, right? Feast of Tabernacles. There's a whole bunch of feasts. Sometimes I get messed up which one's which. Paul began to admonish them. He begins to warn them. Paul is not a sailor, right? Okay, how's his credibility on sailing choices? Okay, he's a biblical scholar. He is trained in the law. He's not a sailor. But he admonishes them. He says, men, I perceive that the voyage will certainly be attended with damage and great loss, not only of the cargo and the ship, but also of our lives. Okay, now he's speaking a prophetic word, but these guys aren't connected to the Lord. They don't understand that. But the centurion was more persuaded by the pilot, who was more persuaded by the captain, who was more persuaded by his wallet. And so because the harbor was not suitable for wintering, in other words, they couldn't leave the ship there for the winter, the majority, they took a vote, and Paul lost. And boy, would they regret it. Yeah. The majority reached the decision to put out to sea from there if somehow they could reach Phoenix, the harbor of Crete, facing southwest and northwest, and spend the winter there. Okay? So they were going to try to make it there. And then they get a moderate south wind coming up, and they supposed that they had gained their purpose. All indicators pointed, let's make this trip. They weighed anchor, and they set sail along Crete, close to the shoreline. Okay, so they didn't go far out. And there's that word, but. Before very long, there rushed down from the land a violent wind, and we're just going to call it a nor'easter, because I can't pronounce that, whatever. We don't use that word. I'm going to use nor'easter. It was kind of like last night, but for many days. High winds, heavy rain. The ship was caught in it. It couldn't face the wind, so they had to go with it. So they had to lower their sails and let it drive them along. I'm just ready to barf thinking about this. I mean, and this is not a cruise liner with stabilizers. Okay, this is a relatively small vessel by our standards. Up and down, up and down. I'm just, no, not good. And they ran along under the shelter of a small island called Clauda, and they were scarcely able to get the ship's boat under control. Okay, what's the ship's boat? Their lifeboat would trail behind. Okay, it's attached by a rope and it trailed behind. Okay, it didn't always, like in the lifeboats and the cruises, they're up and stowed and all that. Okay, most ships of that day, even in the 1800s, you would see that often happen with the French or the British or the American fleet. The lifeboat is towed behind for some, I don't know. Okay, so that's what they're referring to. They had to bring that boat up and stow it. Okay, and they did it with great difficulty. So after they hoisted it up, they used more cables to undergird the ship. So they take cables and they're holding the ship together with ropes. I mean, okay, the drama is unreal. How they're doing this, I don't know. So they get the cables under the ship, and they fear they might run aground on the shallows of Syrtis, so they let down the sea anchor. Now, all right, I did look this one up. What is a sea anchor? Okay, this is not your typical anchor. This is not something you drop down to hook onto the bottom to keep you from moving. This is an anchor that would have, in modern day ones, I don't know if back in Paul's day, They had, think of a drag racer, and they drop the chute out the back to slow them down, and it's got the parachute out. This is what a sea anchor would be like. It's something that slows the ship, okay? It doesn't anchor it into a spot. It slows, it creates drag, and it makes the ship go slower and provides a greater degree of stability, okay? So that's what they drop. But they're still being driven along. So the next day, as they were being violently storm-tossed, okay, I'm barfing again, they begin to throw the cargo over, okay? So remember what Paul has said, okay? This is what I'm seeing happening. This is what the Lord's shown me. And he probably didn't say the Lord has shown me this, because he figured if he said that, they think he's wackadoodle, okay? But he's like, you know, they throw the cargo over, and then after they throw the cargo over, the next day they throw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. Now the ship's tackle is what they use to load and unload and move anything heavy. Okay, it's a series of pulleys and levers and ropes and such, and it would help them load and unload. So they've tossed the cargo, and once they've tossed the cargo, they use what they use to lift the cargo and toss it, they toss that too. Okay, they are throwing everything overboard to what? Lighten the ship. Okay, because how much water do you think they were bailing? Everybody was on bailing duty. So they saw neither sun nor stars for many days, and no small storm was assailing us. Can you be a little bit more understated there, Paul? From then on, all hope of us being saved was gradually being abandoned. They were losing hope. Okay? Losing hope that they were going to survive this. And they went a long time without food. Now, why would they do that? They're too sick to eat. Trust me. You hate eating. Paul tells them, he stands up in their midst. He says, men, here's his I told you so moment. You should have listened to me.
Could they have bailed all the food too?
No, they didn't yet. You'll see that in a moment. Men, you ought to have followed my advice and not set sail from Crete and incurred this damage and loss. Again, I told you so, you should have listened to me. And yet now I urge you to keep up your courage. Okay, he's trying to restore their hope. For there shall not be loss of life among you, but only the ship. For this very night an angel of God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood before me and said, don't be afraid, Paul. Yeah, right. Don't be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar, and behold, God has granted you all those who were sailing with you. Therefore, keep up your courage, men, for I believe God. It will turn out exactly as I have been told, but we must run aground on a certain island. Okay? So he's telling them, be of courage. I've prayed. I can tell you this whole time he's been praying not only for his salvation of the storm. You know, I think Paul's at this point, he doesn't, okay, if I die, I die. That's great. I'm going to heaven. But he's praying for the lost. He's praying his concern. I remember the story of a believer in the Titanic. His family he's lowered his wife and children onto the boats, and he himself, as a man, he's in the water, and he's got a life vest. And he's swimming around to these other people saying, do you know Jesus? Do you know Jesus? Until he finds somebody who doesn't. He hands him his life vest, and then he perishes because he knew where he was going, and he didn't want somebody who wasn't saved to die. Okay? This is what Paul's thinking. He knows, I know where I'm going, but there ain't nobody else here that does. Okay? Actually, Aristarchus, his friend, is with him. But that's it. The rest of them, they don't know the Lord. So he's been praying for their salvation, and God has heard him, and he encourages them. He's trying to build back that hope. You're going to make it. We're going to survive. The ship will be lost. All the cargo will be lost. It'll be a total financial wipeout, but you're not going to die. Okay? So, the 14th night had come. This is 2 weeks. This is one heck of a storm. 2 weeks. They had driven along in the Adriatic Sea. About midnight, the sailors began to surmise that they were approaching land. Okay, so they were taking soundings, and they were getting closer and closer. And they were very afraid, this verse 29, they were very afraid that they would run aground on some rocks. And so they cast out real anchors, 4 anchors from the stern, from the back of the ship. And they wished, they prayed for daylight. And some of the sailors decided, we're going to make a run for it. Let's lower the lifeboat. And they were pretending, though, to be doing something else. So Paul tells the centurion, tells Julius, unless your men remain on the ship, you yourselves can't be saved. If these guys ditch and they go out in that boat, we're all going to be lost. Do you think Julius has learned to listen to Paul now?
I think so.
Yeah, he has. So the soldiers show their faith in what Paul has said. What do? They cut away the lifeline to the only thing that could potentially save anybody, and that's the small lifeboat. Problem with the lifeboat, it wouldn't have been able to carry 276 souls. That's how many people were on board. 276 people on that ship. And until the day was about to dawn, Paul was encouraging them all to take some food. And I'd be looking at Paul saying, that ain't happening, dude. Today is the 14th day. You've been constantly watching and going without eating, having taken nothing. Therefore, I encourage you to take some food, for this is your preservation. And for not a hair of your head, this is a euphemism because I lose hair all the time, any of you shall perish. And having said this, he took bread, gave thanks to the Lord, and he broke it, and he began to eat. So he's taking the lead. He's saying, eat, 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 eat. You need it. And all of them were encouraged. See, it's working. He's giving them back their hope. And they took food. And here we learn that it was 276 people on board. And when they had eaten enough, they began to lighten the ship by doing what? Throwing out the rest of the food. Again, evidence of faith. They were going to lighten the ship some more, throw out the wheat. And when the day come, they couldn't recognize the land, but they did observe a certain bay by the beach, and they said, let's drive the ship there. Let's see if we can reach it. Unfortunately, they cut off the anchors, and they pointed in the right direction, but unfortunately, they're going to hit a reef. And the reef where the two seas met, they ran the vessel aground, the prow stuck fast and remained unmovable, and then it began to get beat up by the waves, and it was beginning to be destroyed. So the soldiers' plan, again, remember, under Roman rule, if you had a prisoner and they got loose and you lost them, whose life was at stake? Yours, okay? So the soldiers are like, we're not going to die for these guys, okay? If these guys die, we're in trouble. You know, if they break free when we get to if they run off, we're in trouble. So our best move here to preserve ourselves is to kill these guys. Well, Julius steps up, says, not going to have that. And he keeps them from killing them and commanded those who could swim to jump overboard first and go to land. Then the rest should follow, some on planks, others on various things on the ship. And thus it happened that they were all brought safely to land. Okay, this is when Paul, in 2 Corinthians, when he talks about a night and a day in the sea, he's
night and a day.
More than a night.
yeah,
2 weeks.
yeah. So I don't know how long it took to float around or get to shore, but it wasn't good. Okay,
Deadliest Catch, you ever watch them?
I get seasick watching that stuff. You know, I just would not have been a good person on that. I thank you, Jesus, that I was not on that journey. But the key was restoring hope. Paul had said, you should have listened to me, okay? But everybody was losing hope of living. They're letting fear. When you lose hope, fear comes in, okay? Faith and fear don't coexist, okay? So they were not believing they were going to live. So fear was going to take hold of them, and they were going to do whatever it is to preserve themselves, and it wasn't what God wanted. And so Paul was just continuing to try to speak courage, speak hope into them. Now, as we get into that final chapter next week, they're going to land on Malta. And he's going to do the Lord's going to do an amazing ministry there. And it's hard to tell how many of these people, the 276, come to faith as a result of what Paul did on Malta. He did extraordinary things by the grace of God and the power of God. He not only changed the Maltese people, but I guarantee you some of the people that were on that ship, their lives were changed.
Maybe Amir is doing the same thing right now.
Say it again.
Maybe Amir is doing the same thing.
Amir. Yeah, it could be. It could be. So be encouraged by that. When the storm's tossing around, that's the enemy at work. But God, he just speaks peace to the storm, okay? And that's what we need to grab hold of. Last night's storm, I don't make light of it. I was really traumatized by Hurricane Sandy. I don't ever want to go through that again. And so when I hear the roof cracking, creaking, and the winds out there, last night was the first time I could really just honestly say that peace was still there, and I could just honestly say thank you. There was no fear, and I did get up and check the weather app to make sure there wasn't a tornado warning, because I heard what sounded like hail. But God keeps us in the midst. Yeah, the whole band went through.
Look, I don't live a mile from Patton and Robin. And
Yeah, y'all were in a coma.
It was just,
Y'all were. It was a.
I asked the Lord for peace.
Let me pray, and then we'll let you get going. Father, I thank you that you are far greater than any storm Satan can throw at us. Thank you that you keep us in the midst of the storm. Thank you that you preserve us. I pray that we'd not lose hope when we see chaos around us, but know that you're going to bring peace and victory, just like you did for Paul. And I just give you thanks, give you praise. Thank you that you're going to go before us this week. I pray for opportunities to share the gospel, and that people will come to faith in you, and that you come get us, Lord, for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.